Happy New Year to everybody. Hope everyone had a good holiday.
Yes, sir.
You know, the thought that I would be with you all soon was what sustained me through the holidays. So, thank you for doing that.
Well, you're the reason I came back.
Okay, well, good. I'm honored. I thought it was a pay raise. No? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for being here as we get ready for the 2022 legislative session. I'm going to begin by making some brief opening comments, and then I'll be happy to take your questions. As you may recall, 6 months ago, I announced a $50 million budget proposal on two critical public policy issues: public safety and mental health. When I announced these priorities last summer, I made clear then, as I do today, that these two topics, public safety and mental health, will be my focus for the session that begins Monday. My reasoning for these priorities won't surprise any of you. You have reported on both of these issues and the data behind them now for months. The homicide rate in the city of Atlanta hit its highest point in 20 years. In 2020, 157 murders. Unfortunately, that number was topped in 2021 with 158 murders. We also know that suicides among young people across the state are also up, with some 67 youths having died by suicide in 2021 through November, and that's up from 55 such tragedies in the entirety of 2020. Both public safety and mental health speak directly to the quality of life Georgians enjoy, and they have a profound impact on our families, our communities, and our economy. You will see both budget appropriations and standalone legislation addressing these issues in the coming weeks, and I will speak more in detail on them in my remarks at the Georgia Chamber of Commerce's Eggs and Issues breakfast next week. This upcoming session, we will also look at some issues which I believe are fundamental to our values as a state, such as parental input into a child's education and the rights of law-abiding citizens under the Second Amendment. And as always, the Constitution prescribes we will focus on passing a balanced conservative state budget. As part of that discussion, we will also look at responsible ways to provide tax relief for Georgians to let them keep more of their hard-earned money. For those of you who want a refresher on context, I'd remind you that we have cut income taxes on Georgians twice in the last few years while maintaining both the highest available bond rating, the AAA rating, and our ranking as the best state in the nation in which to do business. So you can feel free to include that data in your reporting. Our work will begin Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. when I call the House to order. Again, for those taking notes, I did say 8:30 a.m. Monday is a special day. I anticipate we will have a short business session to dispense with necessary formalities. And then Monday night, I look forward to visiting another state. And I look forward to helping bring back on Tuesday the National College Football Trophy to Georgia. I understand that we have a tentative agreement with the Senate to be adjourned on Tuesday, and we will then reconvene on Wednesday both to celebrate the national title and get business underway. One final thing, and I would be remiss if I did not pay tribute to a mentor and dear friend whose legacy we will celebrate later today. Senator Johnny Isakson was a dedicated public servant and a good and decent man. He served our state and nation to the very best of his ability over a long, distinguished career. You all know the impact that he had, whether it was expanding economic opportunity or working to ensure Georgia's children got a great education. He was the best example I knew of civility and collegiality in a political environment that could sure use a healthy dose of both today. This state is better because of Johnny Isakson, and I am better for having known him. I'm also have been made aware that there is an expectation of the largest group of members of the U.S. Senate to ever attend a funeral outside Washington to be present for the Isakson Memorial. With that, I'll be happy to take your questions and visit before I head out to the memorial. Who's first?
Speaker,
Yes, Brian.
you said increase parental input, sorry about that. You said legislation to increase parental input into a child's education. Can you elaborate on that, and will it also include a ban on CRT in that legislation? Could you elaborate on that?
Well, the broad goal is to make sure that parents feel like they're in control of their children's lives. This was something that we saw in Virginia. A lot of discussion up there about this whole topic. It includes not only CRT, but many of the other alternative notions of history and other things that are being discussed, if not taught now. And I think it's important that we address those and put up some guardrails so that we don't run into those kind of problems here in Georgia. Yeah, Greg.
You told me after the Orange Bowl you'd decide on whether or not you'd support the Buckhead City, or at least you'd have a little more detail about your
That was
stance.
before I knew we were going to win.
Well, we won, and now we're heading to Indy. But where's your stance on Buckhead right now?
Greg, I did say that to you. You got too good a memory. I really haven't thought. I mean, I think about it a lot. Okay, I haven't come to a conclusion. As I have said to some of you before, this is a big this is a big issue. I understand the feelings are intense on both sides. I also understand a large part of why we got to where we are, which was a failure of leadership in City Hall that allowed the crime epidemic to just completely get out of control here in the city and in Buckhead. But at the end of the day, what we do will set a precedent. And it will be a precedent that we'll be called upon to follow, whichever way it goes, in a year or two, or in 5 years, or in 20 years down the road. And I want us to get it right so that, leaders that are here years from now can look back and say that they don't want to do a similar issue the way we did it. So I'm not going to put a time limit on myself anymore. Yes.
You would support reasonable tax reform. Does that include eliminating the income tax altogether?
I'm sorry?
You mentioned that you support reasonable tax reform. Would that include, some folks want to eliminate the state income tax altogether? Is that not reasonable? Something less than that would you support?
Well, of all the proposals I've heard to eliminate the income tax altogether, I haven't heard of how we're going to make up the gap and what are we going to close and cut to do that. That's become one of those things that sounds good on a bumper sticker or a soundbite or maybe even a campaign ad. But we have to govern. We have to make decisions. I think going at it in an incremental way is a much more desirable way to do it, and that's what I favor. That's how I favor doing it. Frankly, I think that's the responsible way. Yes, ma'am.
You
mentioned, a income tax cut elimination sounds good on a campaign ad. Are you worried about certain legislation lawmakers will bring that are seeking higher office this session, hindering larger legislative reforms like mental health that you're pushing?
Not really, because I don't intend to let it. I think I've been pretty clear about that. We've got some important things to get done. Public safety, mental health, the budget. These are things that I think we can make a difference in the lives of Georgians in doing. I'm not going to be distracted by what other people are doing in their campaigns. As I said before, I respect their ability, obviously, or their right to run and do what they want to do. But I mean, even if it weren't an election year, sometimes we have some pretty silly bills that are introduced here. And I know that many of them or many of the bills, particularly this year, they're designed to get your attention and for you to give them coverage. To the extent that they succeed, I guess they'll keep doing it. But, I've got a job to do, and I'm going to do my job. Yeah, Patricia.
You haven't mentioned abortion yet. There's some talk among Republicans about introducing a 6-week abortion ban of some sort. Where do you stand on what Georgia has already passed, and is there room in this session, in your opinion, to do anything?
Well, what I've said on that issue is that I've been around here for a couple of debates on abortion. One we did back in 13 or 14 with the fetal pain bill, and then more recently in 2019 with the heartbeat bill. There's no topic that we talk about that's more emotionally charged than that. The issue is pending before the U.S. Supreme Court, and so I think that my position is we ought to wait, and we will wait until we get a decision on the Mississippi law, and we can then look at it and see how it impacts what we did in 2019. So I don't intend for that to be on the agenda this session.
Hi.
Yeah, hey.
Hey. Will you elaborate some more on what you would like to see in a permitless carry bill? And also, what is your response to people who have concerns about expanding gun access?
What was the last part?
What do you say to people who are concerned about expanding gun access?
Permitless carry and constitutional carry, there are different concepts behind those. It's easy to say you're for constitutional carry till you start fleshing out the details of that, and permitless carry too. I think we have some safeguards in the law that, regardless of which direction we go in, we need to keep. For example, the mental health component of that is something that I don't want to see us chunk that away. I've talked with law enforcement officers about that, and they're very fearful on that. I think we can do an expansion without touching those parts of the current law, that's kind of finding a way to do that is my goal. But I think you're going to find a discussion that's that's going to involve a lot of different ideas, and to then see if we can come to a consensus. Let's go back over here. On voting? So I'm not sure what's going to be brought. I know that I heard somebody was going to drop a bill to abolish all drop boxes. I don't know why they didn't advocate that last session, frankly, but I'm bringing a bill that would give the GBI original jurisdiction to go in and investigate election law violations if there's probable cause to do so without having to be invited by the local government. I think that would give us the the professional, thorough, investigative body to go in and, from the get-go and look at these things. I mean, y'all have heard me say, here we are now, 14 months after an election, and you still got some people who don't accept the result. Part of that's due to the fact that we didn't, have an independent, non-political investigation go in early. Had we had that, I don't think we would be here. Yes, Sandra?
Going back to Jill's question on the gun bill, do you support constitutional carry? I know you mentioned that there's some other aspects of it, but do you
Well, we all support constitutional carry. It's in the Constitution. Depends on what version you're talking about.
doing away with permits?
I don't think as long as we have a process by which we can know whether an individual has the restricted background things, the permit's not really what is a big deal to me, and the fee's certainly not. I mean, years ago when this first came up, people would come to me and say, we shouldn't have to pay to exercise a constitutional right. I said, okay. I said, this year, why don't we just abolish the fee and still go through the permit process? So I think that the substance of what we do is more important than the label we give it or the piece of paper that comes with it.
Can I ask another question about Medicaid?
Mhm.
The two proposals that you guys passed haven't been approved by the Biden administration. Do you feel like you would go back and look at those again? Or I know there's still talk, from Democrats wanting to push the full Medicaid expansion.
I know that's being looked at by the executive branch, and I'm not sure whether the better route would go back through the legislature or some kind of an appeal process. I don't know the answer to that, but I don't want to see us give up on that if it's still feasible. Let's come back to you, Patricia. Jeff?
Mr. Speaker, the governor is advocating for teacher pay raises, but some other lawmakers I've talked to have said that they think there may need to be generalized pay raises for all state employees because of inflation in the labor market, as well as maybe some extra incentives for people like correctional guards on top of that. Do you have a position on that yet?
Well, I'm trying to keep count of how many groups we're promising pay raises to. And the list gets longer every day. And I know that we're in a fairly good budget situation, but at some point, we are going to run out before we get to everybody, I think. No question about what our teachers need to be paid competitively, but, we've got, prosecutors that have been left out of the pay increase situation over the last few years. Judges are wanting another pay raise. One group I do favor giving a pay raise to is the people who do the work in the trenches in our accountability courts. These are really the unsung heroes of our justice system and our mental health system. The people who are on call 24/7 with clients who are dealing with addictions, and and those people are working for almost nothing. So that's one group that I plan to hopefully take care of them. Yeah, let me Patricia and then Brian, and then we'll go. Then Doug.
Thank you. Do you have any thoughts on the anniversary of January 6th and just the state of our democracy? Do you have any concerns about democracy and the state of politics right now that you'd like to share?
I think we're all concerned to some degree. You know, I enjoy reading history, and I know we survived a Civil War one time. We've survived a Great Depression. I think we're going to survive this. You know, the January 6th was kind of there's fallacies in both sides, in my view. Now, I respect the fact that there were people in Washington that day who were there for lawful reasons, who did not participate in storming the Capitol, and I don't want to include them in what I'm about to say now. The people who went into the Capitol were criminals, in my view, and they're being prosecuted. And they made that a very, very dark day in our history. The governor and lieutenant governor and I went downstairs and did a public statement together that afternoon after the things had kind of settled down. And frankly, I'm disappointed at some in my party who can't accept the fact that that was completely despicable criminal behavior. By the same token, I don't think that it should be politicized as the other side is politicizing it. You know, what we ought to be doing is letting these investigations run their course. Let's find out what the truth of the matter was. Let the chips fall where they may, and then move on past that. I mean, you know, I've been talking a lot now for months about that. It's time we start looking through the windshield rather than the rearview mirror, and that's an issue that we need to do that on. Yeah, Brian.
Two very quick things.
Sure.
I'm hearing of a possible proposal to allow retired school teachers to possibly come back out, not out of retirement, but to help fill some of these needs around the state where we have school teachers. And then I have a real quick follow-up on that. Are you in talks, or are you? Is that something that may happen?
Yeah, I've heard that talked about now for a few years. I haven't heard it any more this year than I have in the past, frankly.
Just real quick, and I
Sure.
don't want to keep going back to constitutional carry, but the governor made a very firm statement yesterday in his press conference, and he said it will be, this is a quote, it will be a true constitutional carry. Now, has his office, and I've read your statement, and today has his office sent over to you what they consider a true constitutional carry? Definition.
We're in discussions. Let's see, Doug.
Thanks, Speaker Ralston. I want to actually follow up on the first question that was asked about CRT, which you described as alternative history, and that there needs to be guardrails in classrooms, I guess, against it. So when you and I were schoolboys, there was a lot of history taught that kind of glorified the lost Southern cause. And a lot of people who want to preserve Confederate monuments.
Not all over the state.
Okay. All right.
I can take you to the North Georgia mountains.
Okay. The folks who want to preserve Confederate monuments want to preserve them in order to teach all of history, they say. Is there an argument to be made that CRT advances the cause of teaching children all of history? And if so, why do there need to be guardrails made by the state?
I think we can teach them all of history without rewriting the history books. You know, the monument thing is a good example of that. I mean, I know, you know, we've taken monuments down here around Metro Atlanta and around the state. But, you know, I'm reading now they're taking monuments down to Abraham Lincoln. Thomas Jefferson being taken out of New York City Hall. I mean, where does that end? So I think that's kind of part of what I'm talking about here a little bit. You know, you can't judge by, you know, we've come a long way as a nation and as a people, and our thinking is much clearer now, I think, and more so than it was 100, 150, 200 years ago. And so to impose our thought process on those people, I think's a little unfair to them sometimes. And so that's really all I have to say about that. Yeah, Ro.
Speaker, I wanted to go back to your opening, talking about your priorities, and one of them was mental health.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? Is it legislative? Is it funding for DBHDD? What does that look like when you say you want to address mental health?
It's going to be both. You're going to see some budget proposals to expand the capacity for treatment of individuals, and to add some additional bed space. And then we have a legislative piece that's going to be a very, very comprehensive bill. We're still working on the bill, because one of the pieces to the bill that I think is critical is workforce, frankly. I think to do what we need to do in mental health, we're going to have to incentivize people to want to be trained professionally in that. And, you know, frankly, we've got a shortage of mental health professionals in this state that are available. And, you know, we got to work on that problem too. Oh, Jill. You got to pay extra to get 3, okay?
Before Jill starts, I will just say we've got time for about 2 or 3 more, so fight amongst yourselves.
I'll try to be quick. Electric vehicles. With Rivian coming, do you see the need for legislation that would kind of create a more like friendly EV environment in Georgia? For example, expanding the Tesla carve out. There's a bill that would do that. Also, maybe taking another look at the fee for EVs, which some people say is punitive.
I met with some.
It wasn't quick.
I met with some groups yesterday that we talked about that very subject. You know, I mean, obviously part of it is Rivian coming to the state, but not just that. I mean, people are driving electric vehicles more, and so they need accessibility to charging stations, and so we're going to have to deal with that, whether they're here or not. But I think the fact that they're here probably adds a little bit more, another layer of urgency on it. Let's go over here for one. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Camille. Of course, it's election year, so a lot of elected officials will be having meet and greets and a lot more active with the public than normal. Talk about the safeguards, having so many people in the building with the Omicron variant being more transmissible, and if you're changing or increasing testing for everyone, even including media that comes in.
Well, you know, somebody told me one time that if you make both sides of a position mad at you, then you probably have done the right thing. And I think both sides are mad at me because of where we've come down on this. But, you know, I respect Dr. Toomey and the Department of Public Health, and I think she's done an outstanding job of sort of interpreting for us and laying out the CDC guidelines that we should follow. And so we've just adopted those. I mean, so the protocols that we will have in the House of Representatives, I can't speak for the other body. I hear they're the steady hand, but so maybe I need to reach out to them. But I'm going to follow the guidance of the professionals, frankly, and that's how we've shaped our protocols this session. Yeah, Greg.
Speaker, I see you're drinking something. I don't think it's a Pepsi. When we last saw you, or many of us last saw you at the Sine Die, you were drinking a Pepsi out of, I think, a sort of protest for Coke and Delta's stance on the voting legislation. Are there going to be any repercussions this session for those two giant corporations for their stand?
Well, you know, redemption is always possible, and it makes you feel good. So, you know, we've had some good discussions over the last year, and I think some people may now see the error of their ways, and you know, they just did what I asked them to do. I said, go read the damn bill. That's all I want you to do. I'm not even going to argue with you. Go read the bill. Yes.
Is it time to move forward and pass something to do with legalizing gambling and letting people vote on it? And if so, do you prefer maybe just doing sports betting, doing everything in one fell swoop?
There is an appetite this session that I haven't seen before to do something. And I think that the appetite and what I've suggested to the proponents is that, you know, we've tripped coming out of the gate, no pun intended, over the details of this thing for years. And so maybe it's time that we ask the question of Georgians whether they want to expand gaming. And if they say yes, then we sit down and decide, you know, what form it will take, whether it's going to be sports betting, whether it be horses or destination resorts, that kind of thing. But, you know, the details have been the real hang-up on this for a number of years now. Yes.
Yeah, it's just following up on that. So do you think Georgia has misstepped because we haven't done anything before and that we've maybe missed some money on this? Because you've talked about all the money that you've kind of promised that all of these different groups might want to get raises, everybody from police officers, corrections, mental health professionals. Are we coming a little late when it comes to sports betting or gambling?
I don't think so. I mean, we're a big state. I mean, somebody's always going to be the last to get in, but that don't prevent them from getting in. So I don't think that. I mean, had we done it 10 years ago, would we have more money? Sure, but I mean, it is where it is now. Let's do two more because he's had his hand up, and then Riley, not Jill, not Jill.
Thank you, Speaker Ralston. I don't know if these figures are exactly correct, but I've seen that there might be about like 1.5 billion maybe left unspent from federal aid from COVID. I think it was the State Fiscal Recovery Fund. Are y'all involved in conversations about how that's being spent, and would you like to?
We have been. I mean, obviously, I think we ought to be controlling it, frankly, but that wasn't the way Washington designed it. But you know, Governor Kemp has involved members of the legislature in certain specific spending areas to have input, and I appreciate that and applaud him for that. So, to a greater extent than we had early on, yes, we do have some input now.
Thank you for taking my final question. So along the same vein, we're going to have the hot button issues because it's an election year, but we're still in the midst of the pandemic and we're seeing concerning numbers. Is there money that you want appropriate in the budget for extra testing? Any legislative action around COVID that you think we need to take at this point?
Well, we'll probably have to extend the protection against lawsuits that we've done now twice and let it go for a year. I think that's going to be one legislative thing we're going to need to do. You know, we may have to look at testing because I'm beginning to hear just in the last week that tests are kind of getting hard to find. I mean, so you know, maybe we kind of monitor that. Again, I'm going to follow Department of Public Health's recommendations on that. They've kind of been on top of it.
It's a great note to end on. Thank y'all.
Thank you all very much.